Uh, Jeff, just so you know, we can see a lot of the back of your monitor, just FYI. There we go.
Thanks.
Right, are we ready? Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this Meet the Cohort Convo about the South Yuba River and what transpired this summer and what's going on right now. And also, we're going to meet the members of the cohort, the South Yuba River Safety Cohort, which has been working for several years now. And to introduce the cohort, I would like District 1 Supervisor and Chair of the Board of Soups, Heidi Hall, to give the intro.
Thanks, Pascal, for hosting this, and thanks to everyone who is on the call and calling in to listen. The South Yuba River Cohort, I started working on this with Supervisor Weston when I came on the board about 4 years ago. And we went from a once-a-year meeting to meeting every month during the fire season, as we saw how much work there was to be done. This group includes state, federal agencies, the county folks, community advocacy organizations, a number of fire agencies. And what we're doing is we're working together to meet the needs of the Yuba River Canyon, public safety needs and fire safety needs. So there's a lot of work we've undertaken in the last few years. There's a lot more we have to do, but the great news is that we have this excellent organization with committed people from all these organizations. And we're going to continue to work to keep that river, the river clean, safe for people, safe from wildfire. And you'll hear a lot more about it, hopefully from some of the folks on the panel and from the questions you're sending in. What we'd love is for you to be aware of what we're doing and to provide your input to us and to support the work we're doing down in the River Canyon. So I'll leave it at that, Pascal, and let's move forward.
All right, and then your partner on the other side of the river, that would be District 4 Supervisor Sue Hook. And Sue, welcome, and I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, thanks, Pascal, and thanks everyone for being here. The Yuba Cohort has just been an outstanding committee to work on, especially with all the folks that are here, and you'll get to meet them today. And Heidi kind of hit all those points, so let's just get right on to the important stuff. Here we go. Thanks, Pascal.
And now to the guy who worked hardest to set all this up and who has been instrumental in keeping the cohort on track, and that would be Jeffrey Thorsby from Nevada County Board of Supervisors. So first of all, Jeffrey, thank you for all the work that you put into the cohort, and I believe you have a lot of things to tell us, so over to you. And do unmute yourself.
Rookie move. Thank you so much, Pascal. Again, my name is Jeff Thorsby. I'm actually the Senior Management Analyst for the Board of Supervisors for the County of Nevada. And I have really had the privilege of serving underneath District 1 and District 4 supervisors and really working with this cohort, which is a terrific group of folks to work with and major stakeholders. What I'd like to do today is just provide a quick summary presentation to help the viewers today understand a little bit more about what the cohort is. So I'm just going to share a quick presentation, and I'm going to be mindful just to keep my presentation pretty brief because I think the real value is with the folks on the call today. So let me go ahead and share the screen, and perfect. And let me know if you can see that. Let's see. I'm sorry. Okay, so you guys should see this, and so real quick, just opening slide, Convo with the cohort, and so I just want to provide a quick summary overview presentation of what the Yuba River Public Safety Cohort is. So what I'd like to do is just briefly talk about, well, what is it, who is it, and why? Why is this group activated, and what, and then how? What is this group doing to really address those concerns? So first of all, let's talk about what is it. The cohort is a multi-agency work group of federal, state, and local and community stakeholders with the purpose of addressing jurisdictional policy gaps and coordinating public safety and law enforcement efforts in the South Yuba River corridor to mitigate wildfire and other public safety hazards. It's important to note that unlike some other committees or commissions of the county, the Yuba River Cohort is an informal work group. So it's not a formal commission. And one of the things to note too is that this isn't specifically an action body. And so what do I mean by that? This group doesn't make a resolution and suddenly start approving budgets and moving forward. Versus it's really, the way I like to think about it, it's really a roundtable of discussion. You know, kind of in my next slide, kind of show who's in the cohort and then kind of talk a little about the what, but there are so many jurisdictions, both of federal partners, state partners, local partners, private property owners. You can imagine each one of those jurisdictions has its own set of policy objectives, set of regulations. And so with that, there can be mismatches, essentially, if you will, of different policy gaps. And I think as most locals know that the Yuba River, while it's one of the most amazing kind of gems of the community of our county in terms of a natural resource, that watershed, it's also dangerous, both for drowning, but also potentially for wildfire hazards we recently saw in the Jones Fire. So real quick, let me kind of go over a little bit who is in this work group. As Supervisor Heidi Hall mentioned earlier, this group initially started out way back, even before my time, which essentially was an annual meeting really to discuss ahead of addressing really Memorial Day weekend and kind of strategizing how to work together throughout the year. But it became apparent to both Supervisor Hall and Supervisor Weston back in 2017 that more was needed as wildfire, as we saw in the October fires in 2017, and across the state, the unprecedented challenges and concerns over wildfire, and then other safety hazards in the corridor. So on the federal end, we have representatives of the Bureau of Land Management. We have representatives of the United States Forest Tahoe National Park. On the state, we have state parks. We also have California Highway Patrol. And I've kind of divvied out separately. This includes state and local partners, but our fire folks. So we have Cal Fire, we have Nevada County Consolidated Fire, we have North San Juan Fire, we have Penn Valley Fire, and we have the Town of Washington Fire Department. And then from the county side, we have the Board of Supervisors office, of course, the two supervisors who introduced themselves. We have the Nevada County Sheriff's Office. We have the Office of Emergency Services. We have Public Works. We have the County Executive Office. And actually today we also have a representative in the environmental health. And then we have a number of advocacy organizations, and these are our stakeholders who are really experts already in this watershed, in the watershed field. And so that includes the Bear Yuba Land Trust, South Yuba River Citizens League, and most recently we also now have the Sierra Gold Parks Foundation contributing to part of these conversations. And last but not least, of course, key component is members of the community and representatives of different community organizations, which includes the Lake Vieira Road Mountain Homeowners Association, representing a lot of the folks who live in the area, obviously not everybody. We also have the Friends of Purdon Crossing, and then we have a couple of community representatives who are a part of the cohort discussions. So why is this important? I touched base on this a little bit when I first introduced myself, but really we have a patchwork of multi-jurisdictional boundaries, laws, regulation, and private property. Down here you can see this is a map, and I know it's small. Your viewers probably can't see all the details, but what you can see is there's patches of different colors. And those patches of different colors really represent different land that's owned by public lands, whether federal, state, or private property. You can see it's essentially a patchwork. So that's a very challenge, kind of getting to that policy jurisdictional gap that this cohort really addresses. Another component is, on an average year, we see between 600 to 800,000 visitors each year coming to this watershed. To give a little perspective to the public out there, just as a reminder, in Nevada County alone, we have a little less than 100,000 people. So we have about 6 to 8 times the population of the actual county coming and enjoying this watershed. So a huge amount of visitors. And then with that, we have catastrophic wildfire risk to the surrounding communities. So as we saw with the Jones Fire, a fire can quickly spread in the canyon. It can be pushed upwind and go up, and then go into the outside community, which include not just the residential communities surrounding the river, but also move quickly into Nevada City, the town of Washington, can, as we saw recently, even move into Grass Valley. Another issue that the cohort really, that we see is illegal parking. And so we see the river is enjoyed by so many people, but they park illegally and in a way that blocks those routes. And so should there be an emergency, we need to get emergency vehicles down there to help somebody who might be drowning. We may have an issue where we can't get folks through. Should we have a fire? We have parks that are blocking that. And then additionally, I think as folks are well aware in the local community, should there be a huge fire and folks are trying to evacuate, they may be trying to use some of the different roadways that are being blocked. And so that is a major safety concern. And I also mentioned the town of Washington. We actually have a town on the river face. And so we have representatives today here from them. But just to, to give folks an idea, the town of Washington sees at times 2,000 visitors on a weekend alone in their small community. So there are a lot of visitors coming in from the Reno area into the town. And again, all the issues that I'm raising regarding those risks. And that includes trash, legal parking, all those kind of components. And I also want to mention, on average, we see 3 to 5 drownings a year within the watershed. This last year, we actually did not see that. So that was really exciting news to see something different. But that is still a challenge. And then, of course, illegal dispersed camping impacts escaped wildfire, escaped campfires. Those are all the reasons why this cohort's needed. So real quick, I'm just going to talk about some of the initiatives, and I'll keep it brief, that the cohort has really helped spark and provide recommendation to whether it's the county or to another corresponding agency, and really showing the partnership and the usefulness of the cohort. And on the regulation front, the cohort recommended to the county, and the county subsequently increased their parking fine for illegal parking to $162. I believe the fine before that was, I want to say $37. It was very small, basically what someone might pay for like a parking lot pass in the city. Also, regulations through the cohort, a ban prohibiting open fire within the wild and scenic corridor of the river on private property, with a few exceptions for homeowners. Was initiated in 2018 and then 2019. So that, again, taking regulation actions. Also enforcement, the cohort really helped create an initiative called the Joint Agency Task Force, where the various agencies, law enforcement agencies, including BLM, the Sheriff's Office, state parks, CHP, coordinate together enforcement actions, specifically to help ticket and get the word out that illegal actions are not tolerated down at the river. Of course, increased ticketing, towing. We saw actually California Highway Patrol do a pretty large towing effort ahead of this river season. And then also escape fires, really going out there. U.S. Forest Service has dealt with a lot of escape fires this year. From the communication standpoint, the cohort also helped really get the Purdon Crossing call box put in, I believe, in 2018. The biggest challenge is locals know when you go into the River Canyon, there's no cell phone reception. So that's a major, major challenge. You can imagine if there's a call for service, to get that call out, you'd have to drive out of the canyon, make the call, and then it takes responding agencies so much time to get back in. So that's a major challenge. So the county and the cohort really were able to get a callback put in. We also developed a satellite phone program in partnership with the South Yuba River Citizens League with their River Ambassador program. And then messaging, we developed a subcommittee on messaging to try to develop joint messaging so it's consistent across the jurisdictions. Some folks may know about a bandana project we launched, which essentially was an effort to get safety messaging out there and not through the standard bureaucratic trifold that so many folks love, but to get something out there that folks actually would engage with, and we saw some really great success with that. And then also looking at targeted messaging. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of locals going down, but we have significantly a lot of visitors and out-of-town visitors coming in. So how to target messaging out of the area. And then partnerships. I think through the cohort, we've seen cross-agency training, which is really exciting. We've seen the River Ambassadors program from a community organization working hand in hand with state parks, with the county, with BLM, with the U.S. Forest Service. Also, we launched a life jacket program for the first time this year on the river in partnership. The county applied for a grant and then partnered with state parks, who launched a life jacket program down at Bridgeport. So through a partnership effort, we are able to launch a life jacket program, loaner program this year. And so some folks may have seen that. And then also a partnership with Friends of Purdon Crossing and funding in terms of providing restroom facilities down at Purdon Crossing, which is heavily used. And so that's through the partnership of the cohort as well. And last but not least, I just want to mention a little bit, and I put on the slide physical designs, but really looking at how through the cohort can make recommendations to addressing issues that are actually in the park or in the corridor itself. So we've worked with Public Works, who participates in the cohort, to increase parking signage. And then also California Highway Patrol was able to red curb the bridge at Highway 49 crossing. So these are just examples. And I'll just wrap it up. These are just some pictures to kind of show some of the highlights of the work that the cohort's done. But I think the most important thing, I think, just to kick it off, is really, I think, what folks here on this call today have to share. And so with that, here's my contact information. I do encourage members of the public to go ahead and feel free to reach out to me. And then otherwise than that, that is what I have to share. Slideshow, click exit. All right. Here we go.
And we're
Sorry about
back.
that.
No, that's perfect. That's perfectly okay. Thank you so much for the presentation, Jeff. And now that people know a little bit of what has been done and what's also going on in the canyon, all these days and weeks, months, and it never seems to stop. So we got a couple questions that we got ahead of time at townhall@yubanet.com. One of them is, what specific actions are cohort members taking to get more cell phone service established in the River Canyon and adjacent neighborhoods currently without cell phone service, so that wildfires can be reported in real time, and that activity at the river that threatens the environment and public safety can also be reported, because not everywhere are we so lucky to have a sat phone that is at one of the river crossings. Who would like to take that?
If you'd like, Pascal, I can go ahead and jump in a little bit on that question. Again, Jeff Thorsby, analyst for the Board of Supervisors office. This is one of the first initiatives or first questions that the cohort really tried and has been working to solve. This obviously is a major issue in the corridor. We have actually had representatives both from Verizon Wireless as well as AT&T provide presentations to the cohort. And just fundamentally, when it gets down to it, the biggest challenge comes down to resources and the topography of the Yuba River Canyon. We would essentially need to install and put cell phone towers every few miles throughout the canyon to provide adequate coverage that I think that potentially the commenter was really referring to. We've explored other areas of opportunities, including repeaters and key locations. And I think this is a continued area that the cohort will continue to explore. But the challenges are challenging. And so I think on the immediate front, we would be looking at trying to get more call boxes in there at number one, and then exploring other opportunities. And I know that's maybe not an answer that completely satisfactory. But it is challenging, but we are aware and are working on it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And the next question, I believe that would be one for Matt Green from State Parks, is what's up with all the trash? I mean, that's the condensation of a question that is, what is going on with the trash at Purdon and at 49 especially?
Yeah, so here, Matt Green, State Parks. Thank you for the invite today. Just first on the trash side of it, Parks is very grateful to be a 25% property owner down in the South Yuba River watershed. So when we're talking about trash, 49 and Purdon, and we should broaden that conversation all the way back to Bridgeport, and also, you know, what have we done about the trash? Obviously, it's one of the biggest years. Our trash contracts in what we call the Sierra District, which is over 6 counties, has gone up about $150,000 in the past year. So we've provided more support bins and what have you out there. When we're talking about those different crossings, we're talking about crossings that have multi-jurisdictional management. And right now, so what are we actually doing about it is we have seasonals, volunteers, and everybody that are out there in a constant everyday process that are picking it up. And what we're seeing now, and this isn't just true for this particular park unit, it's true throughout most public lands now. In California, we're seeing this just a lot more trash. And so we're trying to get partnerships, more volunteers working on it throughout COVID and all the cutbacks and all the extra cleans that we've had to do for our restrooms in order to open our parks. We've been able to sustain our operations and increase them. But as you could see, it hasn't, it's not something that can be achieved by not one public entity. And I want to reinforce that about 6,000 acres of a 25,000 acre watershed. And if you looked at our numbers, we probably have the most resource that we're providing down there. But still, we're not able to get a hold of it on our own lands. And it's going to take some more looking through the cohort and the public to see how we can get a handle on it. I'm hoping it's a 1-year bump and we can re-educate these folks that are coming into our system. And because we have a lot of new users, the intensity and the numbers that we've seen this year are beyond anything that we've ever seen down at our crossings. But that's what we're doing about it. We understand it's an ongoing issue. And again, we're a 25% property owner, but we go across all the different properties and we do work on to try to make it an answer that will sustain the watershed.
Thank you, Matt. And a similar question for Joe from the Tahoe National Forest. The Tahoe, there's a lot of dispersed camping that's going on, and also a lot of dispersed camping probably in places where they shouldn't. So what can the Tahoe, as a federal agency, what are your plans to rein in a little bit the excessive both behavior and number of visitors? And given the fire danger, we have a lot of people that are very, very concerned that a fire would start on Forest Service land and then come either to, for example, to the town of Washington or North San Juan, or even spread even further.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll also thank you, Pascal, and everyone else, Jeff in particular, for helping set this up. Glad to be part of this cohort. I'm Joe Flannery. I'm the Public Affairs Officer for the Tahoe National Forest. I'm somewhat new to this cohort myself, and I've been impressed with the breadth of knowledge and skills and abilities on this panel. And you know, I'm gonna echo a little bit of kind of what I just heard from State Parks, with maybe a slightly different message, and that is this. Yeah, this year in particular, we've seen it's really hard to quantify, right? We don't track dispersed use. The only number that I can cite is our amount of escaped and abandoned campfires that are occurring mostly due to dispersed campers, all dispersed campers. That's gone up threefold this year. So out of the blue, when we have this kind of COVID environment and maybe traditional vacations aren't possible, we did see a spike, right? So probably a threefold spike in our amount of dispersed campers. And yeah, I'll be frank, we're not prepared to handle, we weren't prepared this year to handle that amount of dispersed camping. Dispersed camping over 1 million acres of the Tahoe National Forest, it's increasingly difficult to manage. I will say this, and this is where I think the Tahoe National Forest is definitely open to an all-hands collaborative solution to look at our dispersed camping, look how we can do better. We've talked about it internally here in the Tahoe National Forest. The pattern that we're seeing is folks are making long-term fiscal investments in returning to public lands. We hear a lot from our for-profit partners, the outdoor industry. They're reporting, giant sales in the last 3 quarters from RVs to camping equipment to hiking shoes. So all these folks that are coming out to visit, they're going to come back next season and the season after that. And I do think that folks have discovered dispersed recreation on the Tahoe National Forest, including all these recreation sites. So what I'll wrap up with in soft rambling is this. About 10, 15 years ago, the Forest Service realized, as the local community and folks like on this panel had already probably realized, that we could not fix or solve the issue of forest health and less resilient forests on our own, right? We realized we did not have the capacity to stand alone in the face of our forest changing. What we've done in this last 10, 15 years is we formed a more collaborative stewardship, shared stewardship-based model to address that. And we're doing that in spades right here locally. We have a massive project. We're working on the North Yuba watershed, Circle, many others. Here in Nevada County, we have the Western Nevada County Community Defense Project. Over in Placer, we have the French Meadows. And we've gone from a model of kind of folks asking the agency, hey, what can you do? To actually sit at the table, and even beyond that, where we have this collaborative approach where, stewardship organizations, other local elected officials, other local governments are actually doing some of the work themselves. And we are very open to extending that model to how do we solve this idea of sustainable dispersed recreation. There's a trash issue, there's a resource damage issue, and there's a potential for wildfire issue. And I think we're going to hear about that all today. So I think the Tahoe National Forest is completely open to a roundtable approach. We have a network and an infrastructure of these shared stewardship agreements. We've been here, done this with wildfire preparedness and forest resilience. And I think it's time to start taking that conversation into managing and some sort of sustainable dispersed recreation.
Thank you, Joe. Speaking of the fire danger, of course, we had several small fires that our various fire agencies got under control really quickly. And then, of course, we had the Jones fire. So I would like to turn it over first to Jim Matthias and then our other various fire agencies, and also to CHP and Nevada County Sheriff's Office to talk a little bit about the problems experienced during the Jones fire as it pertains to basically looky-loos people who want to get into an area that is closed for their own safety. And what were some of the challenges that you as agencies experience, and how can we as members of the public, what should we do differently?
Thanks, Pascal. Jim Matthias, CAL FIRE. I'm the Northern Operations Division Chief for the Nevada Yuba Placer Unit. And to answer your question, we are already having a hard enough time getting folks out of areas where there's fires. We knew this fire was rapidly spreading up the slope. We felt the wind. We knew the direction it was going, and we were working with our partners, the Nevada County Sheriff's Department and SO, trying to figure out how we were going to get people out of there. SO and CHP trying to get people out of there. Those roads are already compact enough. It's already a difficult enough job. Very remote locations, very narrow dirt roads, and we're trying to get heavy equipment into roads that aren't maintained that well and aren't that wide. So yeah, it's definitely a problem, not only on Highway 49, which is a fairly decently wide road with some turnouts, but some of those turnouts, we want to put our fire equipment in. So people that go there to quote unquote get the shot, to be the first one to put it up on their whatever social media platform they have, it really makes it difficult for our response. And with people that are trying to get into the area, that they're doing a myriad of different things. They're getting the shots that we talked about. They're going in to help friends or family, that sort of thing. Trust us, we're trying to do the same thing, but it makes it more difficult. The more cars we get coming in, the harder it is to get the residents out, which is our highest priority. And like I've said multiple different times, our equipment that's going in is not usually a Kia or a Prius. It's usually a fire engine, a fire crew bus, it's a bulldozer, it's water tenders, it's large equipment that we're trying to get into those areas. So the more people that we have on those roadways, the more difficult it is for the Sheriff's Department, CHP, all of our law enforcement partners to get people out and for us to get equipment in to suppress the fire so that we can all go back to our homes and feel safe again. So that's the answer, and that's what we would ask the public is just, we'll send out the social media shots that we can, but every single person can't get in the same area. And then please respect the rules that the Sheriff's Department and CHP are given for road closures and area closures. Even though you might be good intentioned, we're doing the same thing to make sure that people are getting out safely. So we don't need another 200 cars on the same roadways trying to do the same thing that we're already doing, because we're doing it in a very systematic way when we can. That's it for me.
Thank you, Jim. Turning to the other Jim, Nevada County Consolidated. So as the premier local fire agency on the Jones Fire, Jim, anything that you'd like to add?
Well, good afternoon, Jim Turner. I'm the chief of Nevada County Consolidated Fire. And I'd just like to kind of add to what Chief Matthias just stated was, our number one priority when we come into these incidents ultimately is the safety, of everybody involved, our crew and the public. The one big thing that we do in the fire service, and we do it very well, is accountability. And that's for our personnel, where they're at, keep them in a safe location. And I completely understand people want to come down to the incident and they want to take a look at what's going on. They've got concern for their neighbors, maybe their own property. But unfortunately, that puts a burden on us for trying to keep accountability of who's out there. Fire is very dynamic. It shifts. We may have a good idea of where it's headed in one moment, and we get something such as a wind shift, which we saw in the Jones incident, and the fire's headed in another direction. So that accountability that we keep with our personnel, it's there for a reason. And that's where we ask the constituents and the citizens of this county is give us an opportunity to do our job. Like Chief Matthias said, we'll get those pictures out to you, as best as we can. But we've got priorities for the safety of this community first. But with that being said, the very positive thing and reinforcement that did come out of the Jones fire was the proactive work we've done prior to these incidents, through the county with our town hall meetings, working collectively with other agencies. This is not the first time we were together. Definitely to be together for the first time is not ideal when it's an incident. So we make sure we train together and do all these things. So when we do have an incident like this, and fortunately it's not something that occurs all the time, but we can work like a well-oiled machine, and then that's what you received on the Jones incident. And it was cooperation from all disciplines of Nevada County resources, whether it be law enforcement, the county, cities, state, local, and federal partnership. But there is a commitment by these agencies, and we'll continue to have a commitment to make sure this is a safe community.
And moving on to the enforcement phase, and both for parking and during emergency, we have George Stephenson from CHP, and a lot of the roadways that are along the crossings are under your purview. And could you maybe talk a little bit about both how it went during the Jones fire, and then also about the ongoing efforts of both CHP and then CSO with the parking and the parking fines, and And I believe later on we will get some statistics from NCSO about the number of citations that were issued. But I'd like to hear, George, I'd like to hear your perspective on what more is reasonably feasible for you with the resources that you have right now.
Well, good afternoon, Pascal. Thank you for inviting me to this. You know, in regards to the Jones fire, with all the collaboration of all the agencies on not only fire but law enforcement, you know, we worked together on initial stage of evacuations with the Sheriff's Department, doing all the primary field work on that. We were able to help out with that, and then transition to manning or staffing traffic control points that were agreed upon from the incident commander and the Sheriff's Department, what would be needed for fire to get in and out, to maintain access for people needing to get in for critical reasons, whether it's animal rescue or for medicines. It went very well. As Chief Turner talked about, this isn't the first time that we've worked together. We just had a very long training actually about a year ago. It went very smooth. And unlike some past incidents, the cooperation from the public, I would say, was very positive. You know, we've been on incidents where we've had officers assaulted and spit on and stuff like that. To my recollection, we didn't have any incidents such as that in the Jones incident. And, you know, one thing I think helps with that is the collaboration with the Sheriff's Department and the incident commander, and making sure that we're making extra efforts to get people in on necessary things that's deemed necessary and approved by the incident commander and the Sheriff's Department. So in regards to the traffic control points that were put all around the incident, we're never going to be able to cover every road, but we covered just about every one in this case, and we worked together to make sure that they were staffed. In regards to the rivers, you know, the Highway 49 crossing is my primary responsibility on all the river crossings. And every year towards the beginning of the river season, you know, I ask the officers in my office to go in and really enforce the things that prohibit fire department from getting equipment in. In regards to the red paint being painted this year, that came out of several meetings with our key stakeholders on the fire side and Caltrans. And Caltrans was able to make that happen very quickly, which has helped out. And the couple of the other issues that I've talked about in previous meetings is people were parking and restricting access, not only for average people, but we've got there's only a limited amount of access for our disabled people in our county and who visit this county to access our beautiful river. And we actually had some cases where people were parking, blocking those accesses. And so the officers will go out and specifically target those, as well as DUI driving and other needed parking citations. A lot of times, you know, they like to go down from an educational point of view or perspective. And when necessary, we tow cars. We need to keep it safe for everybody visiting, as well as allowing access. In regards to the other crossings, we work collaboratively with state parks, Sheriff's Department, fire department. We had a great operation here just a short while ago. We went down really from an educational perspective and spent some time even just being with the citizens and the people who were visiting to the river that day. And it was a very positive experience and educational. My commitment into the future from our office with what resources we have, of course, our primary highway crossings are going to be our primary focus, but we will continue to assist in the task force efforts that's put together to go down to all the crossings, and when needed, go down there outside of those to tow or help state parks and Sheriff's Department with towing vehicles to ensure that the roadways and the access remain open and that fire can get through.
All right, thank you very much, Jude. And I believe we have Jason Perry from Nevada County Sheriff's Office, and maybe you could actually give us a just a rapid walkthrough about the number of citations and cars that all of you collectively actually wrote, and what more you have planned, because I know that you collaborate between law enforcement and fire, which also I think is something that doesn't happen everywhere.
Yes, thank you. So we currently track citations through 3 agencies. We don't track the Highway Patrol citations or the Forest Service ones, but we currently track citations that are issued through the Bureau of Land Management, the Nevada County Consolidated Fire Investigators that assist, and then our own deputies. With those citations just this year alone, it appears that we wrote about 236 citations. The interesting thing about those citations is when I look at those between Purdon and Edwards, it would appear that the higher number of citations are actually issued at Edwards Crossing. But the really interesting thing that came about with the citations, especially this year from the first of the year moving forward to current, is we were able to break that down by the registered owner of the car and where those cars were actually coming from. So based on that, there were actually, of the total amount of citations issued, we had only 44 citations that were issued to local residents, being with a Grass Valley, Nevada City, Penn Valley, or Rough and Ready address associated to the vehicle registration. The remaining citations, the remaining 192 citations, were all out of our area or out of our county, with the highest number at 19 being vehicles registered out of the city of Oakland and 18 out of the city of San Francisco, and then it started to trickle down with the next highest being Sacramento and San Jose with single digits. So that was really interesting to see as far as that goes. Moving forward, we'll continue to conduct the extra patrols. We're starting to see now that those numbers are starting to tail off just because of the weather and the season starting to change. But we look forward to working with our partners with fire, law enforcement, with state parks and the Forest Service, and continuing forward each year and trying to figure out, is the enforcement working, and do we need to change things up a little bit and be more creative? But I think the parking issue is definitely here to stay for a while. I know we briefly spoke in the past about maybe some engineering ideas or ways to look at it from a different perspective other than just sheer enforcement, but we're definitely committed in continuing our efforts for the public safety down there.
Thank you. And both ahead of this town hall, and I see now also in the live stream, there have been suggestions of putting up a locals only or a local sticker that people could buy. First, the money could be used to actually hire more people to do enforcement, and second of all, it would also allow for some sort of user management on the various river crossings, and maybe have the crossings be safer for everybody, and even also the user experience be more enjoyable. So my question to all the agencies is this something that that you would be willing to consider? And then how practically would that be implemented? Because we have various jurisdictions, so everything is in Nevada County, but there is there's state land, there is federal land. Would people have to get 3 different stickers, or would it be 1 sticker, and then how much, and how would that work? So open to ideas.
I could start out first with that. That would definitely require a lot of discussion, because like you brought up, there's a lot of different partners, both you know, private, public, and state and federal government. You know, I wouldn't think that it's too far fetched to think of an idea like that might help, but I think it would definitely take a lot of planning and ideas and how to be creative and to make a program like that successful.
Thank you. Who else wants to chime in there?
Hey, Pascal, this is Matt Green with State Parks.
Mhm.
So that idea has come up before, and I think it's fantastic how 10 years ago Nevada County supported the first parking lots to charge fees at South Yuba in order to keep some of the resources that we have down there. The state lands have fee authority on our parking lots to charge, and of course when we do that still the differences in the cost of what we're trying to achieve down there with the amount of state park peace officers that we put down there, our maintenance folks, our interpreters who do a lot of the messaging for us. We're still pretty far in the red on that process, but I think that's a good conversation for the county side of it. And just like Jason was saying, there's a lot of complexities there. We don't have any other authority besides what we have on our own lands. And I'll just touch on it too, just for the parking side of it. And I'm sorry I didn't have stats for the meeting today, but we're roughly at about for the South Yuba for parking enforcement about 2,200 violations that we had in Nevada County. And of course, we have Donner in Nevada County also, so it kind of reflects that. We don't have it drilled down to where they're coming from yet, but we're going to work on that. But just like Jason and others have touched on before, you know, trying to find some alternatives of what we're trying to do beyond enforcement with keeping an eye on the actual view shed. I mean, the capacity of that watershed also is that if we had alternative parking or lots and those types of ideas where if you just took with our 5 peace officers now and you took, you know, at a minimum 400,000, 500,000 people, and you look at that ratio of law enforcement to the public that we have down there, it's that doesn't exist in any city or county or anything. It's a real challenge. So I think these are great ideas to pass around about for the parking issues, with always keeping an idea about the entire watershed and how we're going to kind of mitigate the number of people going down there, because right now it's way beyond the carrying capacity of what that watershed can take, how many people can be in that actual river, and to keep the water quality up.
Great, thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I think again, I think it's a great idea, something like that. And again, I'm going to kind of echo state parks there. I'll speak a little bit, and probably what state parks and the Forest Service might have in common. And forgive me if I misrepresent state parks, but for fees collected on the lands that are managed by the U.S. Forest Service, and to have, let's say, another entity collect the fee. The idea being a joint sticker, or excuse me, a sticker that could serve a lot of access points. That would be a little challenging with our authority to collect fees. Now, that being said, some sort of fee collected off-site, off National Forest System lands. And as far as the authorizations, the possible authorizations for someone else to manage use, parking. Let's say a hypothetical example would be if there's a parking lot, and I'm referring to the singular crossing on National Forest System land, lane crossing, the Emerald Pools area. A lot of private property in there. If there was, say, a parking lot that was off-site on private property, and there was fees collected there, and on National Forest System lands, there was a shuttle system or some sort of turnaround operated by some joint cooperator, I think the Forest Service would absolutely be open to those discussions. Like I mentioned before, we do have a lot of the kind of policy infrastructure in place to allow others to operate on National Forest Systems right now to reduce fire risk. We have shared stewardship agreements with a lot of local counties. Folks are already operating on National Forest System lands to protect resources that aren't just wearing, green pants and gray shirts and Forest Service badges. we'd be happy to extend and entertain those conversations that could extend those authorities for managing dispersed recreation.
Perfect, thank you. And so we have state parks. Is Jim, did Jim drop off? No, oh, Jeff here, there he is. Jeff, is this something that BLM could entertain? And then also, Joe just mentioned the S word, which is shuttle and shuttle service. And I know that is something that has been batted around, and we have some questions for people that, is there a way that BLM could help facilitate, put up somewhere a parking lot for the river crossings and then have a shuttle service?
Well, yeah, I think we could definitely, to answer your question, entertain the concept. Like the Forest Service, we have rules and regulations that would make collecting fees along roads that are not necessarily our jurisdiction would be challenging. But I think the concept of the off-site parking situation and that's something that we're actually looking into at this, right now, as a possibility. That has some real potential with, having a centralized parking lot that would allow for, folks to park, and then another entity could manage the actual, under a lease agreement, we could have the county, for example, charging for the parking and taking those fees in, even if it was on federal land. So yes, it's possible. And I think that's something that has got a lot of promise for the future. And I would really like to help facilitate that and see it to fruition.
Great, thank you so much. And so talking about river capacity, carrying capacity, I think it's time to turn to both Circle and the Bear Yuba Land Trust. And because both of you have a lot of volunteers that do a lot of work for the on the river, and also to mitigate some of the impacts, both of the regular and even COVID recreation, and of course, especially for the Jones fire. So, Erin, would you like to kick this off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Pascal. So I'm Erin Tarr. I'm one of the co-executive directors at Bear Yuba Land Trust. Very happy to be part of this cohort. And I just want to take a moment to kind of clarify BYLT's role in the South Yuba River corridor. We are certainly advocates for sustainable recreation and watershed health. We are also landowners, land managers, as well as trail builders and trail managers. So we do really have a lot of skin in this game. So to say, we've got 400 acres in the South Yuba River that we own or have conservation easements on between Highway 49 and Edwards Crossing. And then up by Langs Crossing and Spalding, we have about 5,000 acres that we're working on conservation projects up there. So the South Yuba River is one of our strategic focus areas where we're really looking to create a comprehensive corridor of connected and protected land. So we've heard a lot about this kind of patchwork of ownership. There's multiple agencies down there, multiple private owners, which really make cohesive management an issue and management of sustainable recreation difficult. So we're trying to help in that way as well. We're always looking at more land to conserve that is kind of a buffer or in between the federal and the state lands as well. As far as, our impacts this year, we were certainly very impacted by the Jones fire and what happened out on Independence Trail. Some people also don't know that we own 207 acres there along the Independence Trail, interspersed with state parks, and all of the structures, well, most of the major structures that burned were on our property. So we've been working very closely with state parks and the county and to figure out how to move forward there. So I think, Circle and Melinda certainly have more information on carrying capacity and what's going on down there.
Thank you. And I believe that right now the Bear Yuba Land Trust also has a fundraiser going to actually help with some of the impacts that you experienced, that everybody experienced over through the Jones fire. And where can people find more info on that?
Yeah, so just yesterday, a collaborative group, we launched a GoFundMe that can be found at bylt.org. So the GoFundMe, we're trying to raise $500,000. That is going to cover costs for state parks, as well as the land trust, as well as the Sierra Gold Park Foundation. We're all working together here on this phase 1 to get the land stabilized before the rains come in. So State Parks is out there now doing a lot of that work, also removing hazard trees, cleaning up some of that debris out there. And then we're also forming a trail revisioning group under Sightline Architecture is going to be helping with that. So we're going to have kind of a community group, and some of these stakeholders come together and look at what do we want the Independence Trail to be moving forward, and how can we keep the very important historic aspects of it, the very important universal access for wheelchair accessibility, visually impaired, strollers, and so that's what that GoFundMe is for. So bylt.org.
Thank you. And Melinda.
Sure. So Melinda Booth, I'm the Executive Director at the South Yuba River Citizens League, also known as Circle. And we work in the entire Yuba River watershed, but I'd say that the South Yuba corridor is where our origins are and is a main focus of much of our work, and specifically our outreach. And the Yuba Rivers, especially the South Yuba River, is in risk of being loved to death. We've seen visitation increasing year over year over year, culminating in what anybody who drives by the Yuba River, visits the Yuba River this summer especially, saw was increased impacts to the point where it is causing hazards for safety and for watershed health. So that's what we are really looking at. And one of the programs that we've implemented that's been ongoing now for about 8 years is our River Ambassador program, where we actually have volunteers and paid staff at the river crossings on the South Yuba from Memorial Day to Labor Day, sort of the high season, talking to visitors one-on-one. We've really found that one-on-one communication is what has the opportunity to make a positive impact. Signs are great, press releases are great, but it's really those one-on-one conversations that allow for the opportunity to change behaviors, and that's really what we need. I do agree with what Matt Green said, and that our river is above carrying capacity. I really think it's been that way, and it was way above carrying capacity this year with the increased visitation. So it's something that we're really concerned about, and are working through this cohort, and specifically to try and address. I know you asked the agencies, Pascal, about sort of a use pass idea, and while we're not an agency, I want to share my thoughts on that. This group has been meeting now for what, 4 + 5 years, something like that, and regularly
like 7.
for the last 7. Okay, regularly monthly for the last 3 to 4, and we're in a place now that we've never been before. I'm really proud of this group and the way that the agencies and the nonprofits in the county are all working together, and we've made some progress. Obviously, there's still a lot more to do, but with the progress that we've made, I'm confident that if we decide some sort of use pass is the right thing to do, that all of these agencies can put their heads together and figure out a way to make it logistically work. That doesn't feel like a challenge that we'll be unable to overcome. So I'm confident we can do that, and I think something like that is a good idea that Circle endorses, coming up with a way to actually manage visitation for the safety of our visitors, for the people, and for the health of the watershed. So that's something that we would definitely support. So, but our River Ambassador program was impacted this year, obviously due to COVID. We couldn't have volunteers on the river in the same way. And so the year we needed it most, we weren't able to have it, and that was really a challenge. We also are involved with water quality monitoring throughout the watershed and have over 20 years of data, so that we're able to track some of those impacts and use from a water quality monitoring perspective as well.
Great, thank you, Melinda. And speaking of water quality and impacts, we get several questions from people asking what the impacts are going to be, and people are very concerned about the impact of, well, frankly, both human and pet waste on the watershed and the surrounding ecosystems. And with people coming to the river, some people bring generators with their stereo systems or their TVs and leave a lot of trash behind. But sadly, pet and human waste are a big problem. And then also, what is people are concerned about if we get rain, if we ever get rain again. With the Jones fire, there's going to be obviously some runoff, some sedimentation, and what is being done there, and who is monitoring that? And I think that would be a question that is probably ideally suited for Amy Irani from Nevada County's Environmental Health.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Pascal. Amy Irani, I'm the Environmental Health Director. I hope you all can hear me. I've been having some trouble with my little headphones. So, but yes, that's an excellent question. So one of the things that's really important that came, from an on-site meeting with Matt and our fire folks and Supervisor Hook and our CEO, we had a great tour of the area that was impacted. And I think one of those things that's important to understand is once those rains hit, what's going to happen with that debris flow? How will it impact the Yuba? Melinda and Carl with Circle have been great in their historic data of water quality. We're really looking at the area where a burn, ash debris, tree debris, et cetera, and land flow into the Yuba would be impacted. I've committed to helping Melinda and Carl, and I've had a discussion about doing a preliminary sampling, which they already have the data, and then after the first significant rainfall, doing more water sampling to see what, if any, are the impacts and what types of impacts are there. And, from environmental health, I don't have a massive budget, but I have allocated some funding to help do that testing because I think it is important. I think the public would want to know, here's where we sit now, what are we looking like down the road? I know that Paul has been working hard with our Fed partners, and he's been attending a lot of the meetings and trying to find out what can we do now, what kind of federal resources are there to perhaps do some type of water or soil in certain strategic places to help mitigate the flow into the Yuba. So there's things in play. Unfortunately, oftentimes with when you're looking for assistance and trying to coordinate that, as I'm sure Paul can attest to, things can go a little bit slow, and you have to be very detailed in your request and what you're looking for. So we definitely, from an environmental health perspective, will stay in this to the end. We will work with Circle, work with our RES, and of course with Matt and Parks to try to figure out how we can be helpful in mitigating any impact to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And while we were talking, I've gotten several more texts and comments from people that are really the idea of this use pass seems to be very popular, and this one of the texts is like, why can't the Board of Supervisors simply say you must have a pass? A use pass, or give locals the option to have a use pass, so that it's not just to get priority to actually be able to go to the river and enjoy the river, but also to, again, for public safety, both with fires and with simply too many people. So Heidi or Sue, one of you want to take that on?
I would I'll let Sue jump in there too, but I love the creative idea of having a locals pass. I think the idea is excellent. We don't have the authority to just grant something like that at all. I mean, obviously we don't even have county land really down in the Yuba River Canyon. It's BLM and state parks and private land. But I will say that I think it's clear that we're going to need to restrict access to the river or at times shut access down because it is being loved to death. I'm as concerned about that as everyone else. So I think we can think creatively with this group. You know, the roads and the parking is a restriction right there. If we're in, that's part of what we're trying to do, is enforce that so that once the parking lots are full and there's no legal place to park anymore, people have to move on, go somewhere else. And there was talk at one time of just sort of shutting the park down for one of those heavy use weekends, which would require shutting the road down, shutting the parking down. And so these are other agencies we'd have to work with, and that means staffing and resources. But the idea of having a locals pass and then having a certain number of passes that perhaps are at hotels and inns for folks who are coming to stay and invest in the community, that's a possibility. I think we also have to just acknowledge the conflict between our businesses wanting to attract tourism, and we want people to come up and enjoy this area, versus telling them, well, come spend money in our restaurants and go to the art show, but don't go to the river because that's for us, you know. So I think there's a balance there that has to be met as well. But you know, it has come up as an idea, and I think what we want to do is look at what are other places doing and how is that working, and see in the long run what we can do. I think there are a number of things this group has decided are bigger things that need to be done that might take a while, and this should be one of them. We've done a lot of the low-hanging fruit. We've taken care of that, and it's time to look at some bigger solutions.
So Heidi, I would agree with Heidi, and I think that's one of the unique and wonderful things about this group is these discussions do come up. Just like we've talked, we had a meeting about the parking lot. We're working on moving forward with that. We're working on how would a process of a shuttle work, and how would the funding come in. And I do like the idea, and I agree with Melinda and everyone, how would we make a local pass like that? And then the problem is how are you gonna enforce it? That's the other challenging. Enforcement is always hard, and you hate that word enforcement. You hope that people, I mean, we've been working there. Everybody's PIO team has put out information all year to, and not just in Nevada County, we've reached out to San Francisco Airways, social media. Melinda, I've seen her on social media doing hers. CHP did a great one. So how do you, we can keep pushing the message out, and that's what we're going to keep doing. And then we're going to look for these creative ideas. How will we shut down a road to the river? That was a possibility. We talked about that during Labor Day weekend? One of those. We were worried. We were in the midst of COVID. COVID has added some new challenges here. I just like to say, though, in the same token, even in those, we are working constantly at the good things that are going on, like our life jacket project. I mean, there's good things. Our fire ban is in place, and we got that held over this year to work on that, because that's right now is huge. We had a fire yesterday, not on the river, but close enough up at Graniteville. So, I mean, we're working on those. Our bandana program's been fantastic. I think we've had a lot of interaction with community and people working on that. So a big part of us is still telling our story. We have to keep getting that word out to our public all the time. And I think that back to, well, I know I got off the day pass idea or how we use that. I think it is another alternative. We're not going to fix it overnight, but I think that people need to be aware that we're working on it. Like I said, we used to meet, well, since I've been here, we've been meeting once a month. And we are proactive at moving forward and putting these ideas out and working with the different agencies. And I think that's unique to a bunch of different areas. I think what we're doing in Nevada County is very proactive in protecting our rivers. So I wouldn't say that anything is off the table. Let's put it that way.
Thank you.
That was a long thing. I don't know how I got off on that. Sorry, Pascal.
No, hey, that's perfectly fine. But I think that people really want to hear what the ideas are that are floating around. And one of the another idea that comes with the day passes, besides actually right now on Facebook a kiosk for passes, there's also is there a possibility of getting signage at the river crossings that when they are at capacity, so that basically before people would drop down into the canyon to tell them that the river is at capacity, turn around, or having mostly real-time information where people could see, okay, hey, Edwards is completely full. There's 5 more spots, legal parking spots available at Purdon. Is that something that realistically could be done?
So this is Susan here again. I wish is Trisha on? I don't think she is right now. So I would like to say, so it was a good point that we did use our electronic sign a little bit this year to remind people that parking was limited. And this, I'm going to say, is a sad situation. We put another one up that would have been going more towards Edders. And of course it was vandalized and broken. They're very expensive. We're looking for some more. I do think those signs are I think we had good response. I think people were aware of that. And then that's where High Patrol came in, was huge, especially at the 49er crossing. Even though we had the sign up saying the parking was limited, then we had to do the enforcement side of it. So thank you to our partners there for, sometimes you have to do drastic measures to get people to pay attention. That's like our tickets. You know, we went from $36 tickets to 160, what is it, 100 and whatever it is, $162 or whatever it is. And so we've had talks about that. Is that a big enough, we've had people say that you can spend that in a parking in the city, that's normal parking for the day. You know, so are those some avenues we have to look at? I hate to say the enforcement side of all this, but and we could talk to Trisha more. We got some signs up, or we have put signs up. We've replaced signs numerous times. We put in the red line markers on. Hopefully, I mean, that was a question. If we put in this new parking lot, are people willing to make that walk to the river? That, you know, that's another part of it. Unless we, you know, if we don't have a shuttle right away, are people willing to make that walk to the river to protect things? I encourage people all the time at Bridgeport, use the parking lot. Pay for the parking. It's fantastic. You got a quick access to the trail and you're supporting the park all the time. So encourage people to use those parking places as well. And that was off topic again. I get kind of wound up on this a little bit. Pascal, there's just so many things. If we could just get people to engage with what we already have in place and enjoy this beautiful river, take care of it. I love one day on social media, I would like to throw out, a kid went down there and filled his whole pickup with garbage. I would love to know who he was, because I would give him one of my little coins for just doing that all on his own. I mean, and we didn't even talk about that, Melinda, how you guys had to get through COVID today with our Yuba River cleanup. It's a little bit frustrating sometimes, I'm not gonna lie. Pack it in, pack it out. We put up signage. We worked on that all together through Tahoe with the forestry, with BLM, with state parks, to put up parking signs that are universal to our situation. So you know what I would love is some more ideas from the community. What would you think really works? What do you think that we're not doing that you would like to see or inspire us? Like, just like we had the idea of a ticket. Give us a little note, give us a message, give us some of your ideas, what you think, because we do want to make it better for the whole community and for the public to be safe down there.
Well, we have somebody who has a different opinion, who says river access is a right for all Californians. It's not locals or the county's place to prevent access to that which is paid for by all state taxpayers, especially access to state parks. If you want to restrict access, then the only way to legitimately do it is via the privatizations of these lands. That is a very different opinion to what the cohort does, but it is an indirect reaction to what we're talking about here. And of course, yes, river access and the right to recreate on public lands is a right. Just as there can be some restrictions on it, especially for public health and safety. But it is a valid point that, especially here in Nevada County, we know that people have very strong feelings when it comes to the river and also other public lands. But Belinda, Sue asked you to talk about a little bit about the cleanup, how complicated it was, and maybe give us paint us a picture of how the cleanup went this year.
Sure, I'd love to. So we had our cleanup this year. We weren't sure we were going to be able to do it. So it's something we've been doing for almost 20 years. And we usually have about 800 people who get out. We do it all in one day. And we just couldn't do that this year. We couldn't bring that many people together. We couldn't have a celebration in the park. But we knew we needed this cleanup more than ever. And so our community engagement manager, Daniel Belshi, did an incredible job this year of making sure we could have a cleanup because we knew we needed it more than ever. And so we just finished, we did a 12-day cleanup. So what we did is we spread it out over 12 days. We limited how many people could sign up for a given site. So we had 2 shifts a day, not more than 10 people to come together. And it was all sort of DIY. We weren't meeting people there and making them stay together. It was very sort of a self-guided cleanup, but we would share information and disperse people throughout the watershed. So we had 12 days, we had 16 different sites. We had 20 neighborhood cleanups, which was new this year. So folks who wanted to participate but still didn't feel comfortable going out to the river, they could clean up their own neighborhood, a spot that they'd identify that needed some love, and just go do that on their own. And we helped provide them resources to do that. So we had 20 different neighborhood cleanups, and we had almost 700 volunteers who came out this year to participate. And the numbers are still being compiled, but it's looking like we had well over 5,000 pounds of trash that we hauled out of the river, which was a lot of garbage and recycling as well. And I realized I misspoke, and I want to just clarify, this was our 23rd annual cleanup. I said 20th, so it's actually been 23 years we've been doing this. So we just couldn't let it go without having the cleanup happen. And I would say overall it was a success. And I think what was really neat is that the community has been itching to help. This has been an issue that so many people have seen and wanted to do something about. And so we tried to help provide resources throughout the summer for folks to do some things on their own in a safe way. But this was a real culmination of the community being able to give back to the river. And I'm just grateful for everybody's participation. And hopefully if you head down there soon, you will see the fruits of the community's labor in a cleaner Yuba before we get these big rains, so that garbage is out of the river and doesn't wash downstream, so that we have a healthier place to recreate next spring.
Thank you, Melinda. And we have a question here from the chat from Darlene. How can we pay for summer weekend enforcement officers and that would deal with the road access, fire, human waste, trash? We have community service officers in the towns, for example, and also the fire danger. Is it a realistic option to actually shut down the crossings like Edwards and Purdon when we have, for example, red flag warnings? So can OES, BLM, and the state, could you collaborate that if there is a red flag warning, especially like we had last weekend, is there a way to actually shut down the crossings just to basically to keep everybody safe? And Darlene also says, thank you so much for all that is being done to all the agencies and the Cohort and CHP, OES, Circle, everybody.
Hey, Pascal, this is Paul Cummings, the Nevada County OES Program Manager. I can start off by saying definitely not within our purview in our office to shut down the crossings, but I think ways that we could at least hopefully mitigate that threat would be through messaging. We're already doing a lot of messaging around red flags. I think that the public's already starting to really dial into that. You're messaging on UBANet, it's going out on KVMR and KNCO. We're using those signs, those message board signs that I think Supervisor Hook talked about, to really get the message out that this is a time for the public to really raise their situational awareness and be ready. And that especially challenging places like the Yuba River Canyon, where the topography and the winds are a lot different than you're gonna find other places. But if they're gonna go down there, they have to be extra careful, because a fire in the Yuba River Canyon is not what we want. So I would say from our office's perspective, we're gonna really amplify messaging with the public.
Great. Jeff, Joe, anyone who wants to add something there?
This is Jeff from BLM. I just, want to reiterate that, the fire closures are year round in that canyon, and we do have incredibly restrictive fire restrictions in place now, where you're not supposed to have even open flame in our campgrounds. So, as far as closing the crossings go, I mean, that's really not, it's a county road. So the federal government is going to have a difficult time. And that's not something I would advocate, because it's an emergency egress for a community. So, closing it down would be challenging, and I'm not sure it's a great idea. Red flag aside, we'd have to maybe use other mitigation and more patrols, more people on the ground, more people on the trail. That kind of stuff would be probably more effective.
In that case, Jeff, do you feel that do you have more people that could patrol? Do you have more people that could enforce the regulations, the camping restrictions, fire restrictions? And you are muted. Jeff, you're muted. Jeff? Jeff, you are still muted.
Sorry, was I on mute?
Yep.
Excuse me. I just want to reiterate the staffing that we have is limited. We have 3 recreation staff who do patrol. We have an LEO that does patrols on a regular basis and is doing a bang-up job out there. So, I think the focus of, is there more? I mean, it would be great if there was more, but I can tell you right now, that just isn't the reality.
Anyone else from any of the agencies have some comment on closing the river crossings during red flag days?
Hey, Pascal, this is Matt
Mm-hmm.
Green. Just to tag on what Jeff's doing, and we've definitely appreciated their new staff out there, and they're doing a great job. I think he touched on it. The challenge is going to be, we've had some of our staff, when the governor's asked for law enforcement support, we've sent them down to San Diego and Los Angeles when they were doing what we call hard closures on beaches, and that was a COVID mitigation. And again, that's just going back to what the other someone had sent you in the question for the public lands, and that's always a great challenge. Not only do we have the county roads that feed into the location, we found even in our soft closures that the number of contacts and proximity with these hundreds of thousands of people that we're getting with our officers, that escalates the threat to them for illness and everything else, and that would be a challenge to move people off of public lands. And if it was difficult, then, as you might have seen on the news in Southern California, you can imagine what it would be up here. But I think that's taking a look at our management plan for the watershed is something that we're going to be doing here next year. I know we've talked about it in the cohort, and to think about what types of mitigations we can do with maybe some road closures and things like that. But the hard closures, we had soft closures where we closed parking lots. And of course that pushed all those vehicles out on the public roads and had people coming over the hillsides, and lots of resource damage on that side of it. And you put in a hard closure, which we could do on our properties, and we've done again in Southern California and other locations, but that is just a significant challenge for our officers, and those contacts and really would be unsustainable. So, but good ideas in a comprehensive plan that we should be discussing.
Okay, going back to the topic of waste, trash and waste. One of the ideas was to actually have some messaging that would be, well, not quite graphic, but basically explaining to people that there are facilities at the river and on most crossings. And if you don't pick up your dog's waste, for example, the next time around, when you go and it all washes off, it will eventually end up in the river. So you will end up swimming in the fecal matter. And just as you really hope that everybody who's in a sandwich shop, that they actually wash their hands. So please, could you to come up with something that would make this equivalent? I don't know if Erin or Melinda, if you have some ideas for messaging, just not loving the river to death, but also giving people a severe case of, well, everything from gastroenteritis to worse stuff. Should that be a new square on the bandanas next year?
It probably should be. I mean, it's a tough one, and it's really gross. And nobody likes talking about human and dog waste at the river more than I do. So here we go. I get to talk about the glamorous topics. But it's a real impact, and where we really see these impacts. Well, one is when we recreate. It's no fun to cut. You're in your bare feet, you're at the river, you're enjoying this beautiful serene day, and you misstep into a pile of something, like, not okay, really gross, ruins the day for sure. Just like broken glass, things like that, don't do it. But it has a huge water quality impact, and when you see those impacts is really after the first big rains of the season. We call it the first flush. You all may remember last year, mid-September, and Amy, jump in here at any time. We had an incident on the river where there was impaired water quality, likely due to this first flush, and we went down and did a bunch of water quality sampling, and E. coli was high. And that's not necessarily unusual after a first flush for these very reasons, because you have humans and pets recreating all summer at the river. And then what happens, it rains and everything washes into the river. And so, you know, my advice to you is stay out of the river after these first flush events, because that's when you're gonna see these impacts. And oftentimes it's an invisible increase in E. coli levels and dangerous levels that could harm humans. But last year, because of some additional, I don't know, erosion, there was a color that was very visible in the river that alerted us to this. And so we were able to get these testings done right away and see those elevated levels. You know, Circle has actually implemented since then. We've been fundraising so that we can actually do some additional first flush samplings throughout the watershed to look at E. coli levels and start to have additional data. So we have great water quality data for 20 years, but we haven't traditionally done E. coli in the fall because we've been focused more on safe to swim. So that's changing, right? We're evolving what we do based on new information that we learn. But it's a real problem, and I think Circle picked up, I mean, we asked people at our cleanup to mark like what they pick up, and most people are really awesome, not everybody does it, but like 350 piles of toilet paper in the woods, right? And so you know there's way more than that, and those are just ones that were picked up. It's a real problem, so help us, community.
Yeah. I would just add to that, I mean, education, understanding some of those facts, getting that information out there to really help people understand what the issues are and what the impacts are to the watershed. I mean, we see on our trails this problem all the time. I mean, something that has helped is putting up trash receptacles at the trailheads and having the doggy bags, and, you know, that does help in some way. Sometimes then we're just finding those doggy bags out there, but at least it's easier to clean up and get out of there. So yeah, the education piece, and then wherever we can, I know it's more of a staff issue than having to take the trash and go and collect all of that. But I think those things would work as well.
And Amy, would you have to add anything to that?
I would love to.
Would you like to pile on?
One of my favorite things, because we're food, we're hazardous material and all that. So whenever I'm educating people in food, and I know it's just gonna kill my supervisor, so I pardon me for this topic, but a great way to educate food staff is oftentimes in a restaurant you have a lot of bare hand contact. 70% of all of the nationwide and other foodborne illnesses in other countries come from people not washing their hands. And do you know why? It's a great headline to be perfect on a t-shirt. I actually had some made at my other job, but if you don't wash your hands and you get sick, you're essentially eating that food handler, it's fecal matter. We all carry it on our hands. So the t-shirts I made was don't eat poop. So if you want to make some signs, imagine if everybody went to the restroom in the river and you're recreating downstream. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be swimming in all of that waste or excrement. That's why public pools are chlorinated. So, you know, it's as human beings, you need to be respectful of each other. You're going to a beautiful environment, and you could easily pick up after yourself. So it should be a no-brainer. But truly, there are some serious pathogenic concerns when it comes to our own wastes. So I would be happy to participate in putting together some signs. I've used some great graphics for food, and they're very effective. Because trust me, when the youngsters are working in the back, they have no idea what I'm talking about until I pull out the sign, and they're like, that is so disgusting, and I'm like, it's reality. So it's a good way to get the message across, and sometimes pictures do a better thing. So anytime you want to talk about food contamination, just give me a call on that. So.
I sense a new ad campaign coming. One of the topics that is also coming back is the amount of transient and also people camping at or near the river, especially on federal land for long periods of time, basically turning into squatters. And we had some people that say that, for example, the cruise on fire was started by transients in a transient camp. And if there are any more patrols and actually more, well, there's the E word again, more enforcement of the agencies actually managing their land, because apparently the cruise on fire is off a road that is there's a broken gate, and it's a small Forest Service road, but now there is an enormous amount of cars, trash, etc. that is there, and there's also some contamination of a spring that is in the area, and the neighborhoods are actually asking to what they can do to actually help, and where people can actually report these issues. Is there one email address, or how can people actually connect with the various agencies, and who do you contact when you don't know who owns the land?
Yeah, this is Joe with the Forest Service. I'll jump in on this one. So for the latter part of the comment there, you can go right to our webpage, our homepage, Tahoe National Forest. Right in the bottom there's a contact us. I'll give you a little secret here. If you click the contact us and fill it out, it comes right to me. So go ahead and utilize that to report. A lot of what I do, because of the patchwork network of the Tahoe National Forest, unlike most national forests that are kind of big blobs of federal land, as most of you know, and a lot of our audience probably knows as well, there's this patchwork network, especially on this part of the forest and kind of parallel to the Interstate 80 corridor. It's a really challenging land use pattern to manage, to be frank. And so because of that, yeah, a lot of what I do is helping establish who is managing the property where an incident is occurring. So again, you can start with me, and you know, bear with me if I refer you back to Nevada County Sheriff's Office or somebody else. A lot of what I do on the bureaucratic shuffle, I take it in. I realize it's not occurring on National Forest System land, and I do try my best to pass it on to the appropriate person. Number one. For the former part of the question, dispersed camping. You know, where does dispersed camping meet a transient issue? I will say this. You know, this spring we were meeting with Nevada County. We were collaborating with them on kind of getting together a loose plan, if you will, for some of the occupancy issues along the Highway 20 corridor. I was very impressed. It was my first time working with those county folks. So I do want to thank Nevada County for really reaching out to the Forest Service. Forest Service this is not an issue. It's kind of more of a suburban urban issue. We are created and our structure is to deal with a very rural and public land issues. So I really appreciated Nevada County's time. And just to be honest, that was going on right when COVID hit, and we went from COVID to fire season. And that's what happened this year. So I will say this winter and this fall, if we get through today without any fires and tomorrow, and if we can string a lot of those days together in a row, I do want to turn the attention back to that Highway 20 corridor and really take the invitation from Nevada County to come up with some solutions there.
Thank you, Joe.
Jeff from BLM, I just wanted to weigh in on this. Similarly, the BLM also has some pretty challenging issues regarding homelessness, and the trend I think will probably go up, not go down. So yeah, we're going to have to work, with a lot of different entities to try to tackle this. It's not something that the agencies like the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management are not designed or staffed to be social workers or to really tackle some of these complex issues. So that being said, we've done 390 contacts out there of people, and when we do find areas that are clearly somebody's going to be living there long term, we try to move them off by multiple contacts, and we have moved several groups off. The challenge exists, and it's going to be something we're going to have to face in the future. And I think that in the past, what we've done very successfully with this group is do joint patrols with all the entities, and that's something that's worked. And I think we could kick that back into high gear and try to use that successfully as we have in the past.
Thank you. And maybe Jason or who else could speak for Nevada County if you want to make a report, what are the options?
The main options we would have would be our regional dispatch center. For most of the areas where people are actually habitating and having residences, our dispatch center is going to be able to determine the appropriate jurisdiction, especially out in the county or more rural areas. The dispatchers will know if it's something that's an area that's enforceable by our deputies, and then as you get closer into the cities, they're going to know which officers from each of the cities to dispatch. And we have a variety of ways of dealing with transient problems, kind of like Jeff mentioned and Matt. Through contacts and through different violations that sometimes we can leverage to get people off of those properties where they don't lawfully belong. And then also partnering with our fire agencies if we have multiple violations that allow us the ability to deal with that. So if there's, illegal fires, campfires, things like that, we can bring in the fire agencies to help us enforce those violations as well.
So just to throw it out there too, though, just with Jason, you can maybe talk a little bit. Our home team is doing some amazing work. And I think that is, those have to be done in conjunction. I mean, the idea is get people out of the forest and into housing or into services. So that's another avenue that, and I know actually they've done some great stuff and helping folks find just like what they did up on Sugarloaf. So I think that option is out there, and we can keep moving forward with and give home team that support that they need to keep doing that service.
Yeah, so on an incident that would be more of a pressing incident that was happening at the time, we would want that to go through our dispatch center. But yeah, we have our community outreach sergeant that kind of heads up that program and works with the home team on more long-term solutions that are a little bit more complex. So we have those options as well.
And speaking of the home team, how can people get a hold of that? Heidi, could you maybe enlighten us to what the best way is there?
Yeah, I was gonna thanks Sue for bringing up the home team. I was just typing that in the chat box too, that The home team is a unit that includes law enforcement and social services folks. So they go out and try to connect with folks and get them in a more permanent way out of the woods or the camps, wherever they are. I don't have a direct phone number right here, but you can always call 211. That is our connecting point area. You can say, I have it. That way they can help you figure out, do you need to go straight to NCSO? Thank you. Do you, can they connect you to home team, the home team? And that number is 470-2686. Thank you, Taylor. But the 211 is always a good go-to number as well. So, and I do know we are, I understand, working together as agencies on this issue as well. So that's also new, that we're working with the Forest Service and on this issue of homelessness. And then the county itself has much more robust work on homelessness these last few years. So that's an ongoing concern. It does connect to the fires, it connects to the waste, it connects to safety. And so, you know, we have to stay open to the threats. We have to look for the sources of these issues and be willing to go there to resolve the problems and not just address the what we see on the ground. So we're committed to doing that.
Thank you. Before we start to wrap up this meeting, I think that the questions that we got were mostly about trash, parking, and fire danger, and we're now moving into not the tail end of the fire season, because we're definitely not there, because any fire that starts now has enormous potential, given that everything is incredibly dry, and even the long-term forecast doesn't look good for us to get substantial rains first. But what, in your opinion, what is your outlook for both this late fall and also the winter season? So, and maybe could we start with Jeff from BLM? Do you have any projects that are going to go on this winter season and that people should know about?
Well, yeah, we've got, we're looking at trying to get a parking lot established that would serve both Purdon and Edwards crossings. We're working on trying to get bathrooms into the Purdon crossing area. That's going to be a tough one, but we're going to go forward and try to knock it out of the park. So those two projects are really what I have on the plate for the winter. We have some other little more long-term trail maintenance projects with bringing in some crews and working the trail. That's been something that we've been trying to get for a while, but we've got an AmeriCorps crew, and unfortunately it was supposed to be, we got COVIDed out this year with AmeriCorps, so we're looking to bring them in next spring to try to do some work up there on the South Yuba Trail. So that's what I got.
Thank you. And Matt, what about state parks? I think you have a longish list.
Yeah. First thing I'd bring up is just, we're continuing to work on the where the Jones Fire area was, and just that closure that we have in place. There's tremendous energy from our partner stakeholders. Counties had great support, and that's going on. And then, we have our, as we're seeing this more temperate weather coming on, it's interesting. I was out last Wednesday, 75-degree day, probably the coolest day we've had in a long time on the river. And it was probably no different than a holiday weekend. So part of this is that we're trying to kind of repair and restore property along that Jones Bar corridor in that watershed, and then just trying to, bridge the gap with ongoing operations. You got the Humbug Trail that just opened up again. That was tremendous work by our trails crew. You have, the bridge, the Bridgeport Cover Bridge, hopefully reopening sometime February, March. Looks great. Malakoff Solar, one of the first solar parks in the state park system. That's been going on for a while, but that they're about ready to flip the switch and have that be a green park unit. You look over at Empire Mine, and we're going to be doing some outdoor school classes at the unit. So I think it's really important. We're talking about all these challenges that we're dealing with across the board, that there's really some incredible work that's happening in a collective sense with our partners, Circle, the county, and everybody else. So lots of stuff going on, along with it staying busy.
Thank you, Matt. George?
Yes, Pascal. You know, with our, am I muted? No. With our staffing, like I said earlier, we're going to continue to help out where we can, especially on the 49 crossing. I did want to bring up our stats real quick, if that's okay.
Please.
We had 85 sites in 2019 on the rivers, 175 in 2020 so far. In 2019, we towed 21 vehicles, and in 2020, we towed 31 so far. I thought those would, adding on to the other agencies, would be some useful information.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think that Nevada County Consolidated, the fire season's not over for you.
No, it seems fire season in California seems like it goes throughout the year. But there's going to be, you know, a slowing period once we get some moisture in and some measurable rains. But, you know, with our staffing levels and getting our personnel back and rested from all the assignments they have, you know, we're going to continue to support the operations with the safety cohort. And we're also going to look for opportunities that we can enhance programs. We've been reaching out and working with the allied agencies on new training in the off season, just to be prepared for the seasons when they come up with swiftwater rescue, fire safety, those type of things. So we'll continue to do that throughout the year, but our mission doesn't change. We're still initial response. We're just transitioning into a different type of fire, you know, when the weather's cool, and we start getting our structure response and backcountry rescues.
Thank you. And CAL FIRE, of course, it's a very different story, because CAL FIRE, you are more than busy with an immense number of complexes that are still burning, and I believe we have some of the local firefighters, the local CAL firefighters, are still on strike teams, and in some of the complexes, be that the North Complex or some of the new fires. Jim, can you give us an outlook if you finally get everybody back? You also have 2 of the 35 priority projects that the governor had. They're also in the Nevada Yuba Placer unit. Can you give us an update on those?
I absolutely can. So let's start off with where we're at with wildland fires right now. So we're very stripped. Our partners are helping us out a bunch. What we do is we will send out fire engines to help on these large fires. And just when we thought we were getting ahead of it, we had this last wind event, which started, as everybody's seen on the news, several new fires. So those 2 new fires in Sonoma County, I'm sorry, in Napa County and up in Shasta County are they're just devastating. So already our resources were very thin. Right now we have 5.5, almost 5 3/4 strike teams, which equates to 28 engines out right now. Normally we have 22 engines in our unit with 5 reserve engines. So we've sent out some of our partner engines that we were renting, and all of our frontline engines, with the exception of 1 frontline engine, is the only one left in the Nevada Yuba Placer unit right now. So yeah, we're very thin. We're getting into that time of the year where we get into our large devastating fires. So we're nowhere near the end of this fire season, and it seems like fire season just goes along. As far as predictive services, I think everybody's seen the weather this week. It's going to be hot and dry. We have no chance of rain in the predicted future. Well, you know, if you look at the Farmer's Almanac and predictive services, it looks like we're going to probably get into a very wet winter, which really doesn't help with all the fire damage. You know, if you look at the statistics of California, we usually don't even burn anywhere near 1 million acres. We're already over 3 million acres burned in California this year in the state responsibility areas. So very devastating fire season so far. What we're doing with, you know, specifically in this area of the Yuba River drainages is we have combined on our battalion ignition plans and our unit fire plans some of the projects that go along the Yuba River into one big project that makes it a little bit easier for us to coordinate the efforts. And then, so the good news is that. The bad news is that a lot of our funding looks like it's going to be frozen for a myriad of different reasons, but certainly has to do with greenhouse gas funding, and we don't have the ability to send any of our or sell any of our carbon. So the funding is drying up pretty rapidly for those types of projects. They're going to have to find another way to get that funded. We're also working with state parks. I'm sure Matt will tell you this too, and in working on the Malakoff Diggins area, they potentially have some funding to do a lot of fuel reductions up there with some maintenance that goes along with that. So that's really good news. Those are the two things we like to hear, is fuel reduction and maintenance go hand in hand. So we're looking forward to that project. Maybe we can get that up and running. Certainly it is not the time of year to be thinking about that kind of stuff. We're past the time when it's good to do fuel reductions. And probably it's time to just be ready for response and do those other things to make your home safer, hardening homes, be ready to go, know your area, all that kind of stuff that we talk about. As far as the two priority projects, they're slowed because we don't have the resources to put them on right now. So whatever the Fire Safe Council in Nevada County are managing with their private resources are really all that's happening on the Ponderosa. We are hoping to put our National Guard crew back out onto the Ponderosa project, either on the BLM property or on the original priority project areas, and get some work done there. But most of it'll be at a slower pace than it has been, just because we really only have one hand crew to devote to that. And we have to kind of keep them towards the center of the unit and be ready for initial response. As far as the North Fork project in Placer County, that also has run out of funding for any private work. And like I said, all of our crews are out doing firefighting right now, so they don't have the ability to do that. So that's where we're sitting with our projects. We're pushing ahead as much as we can, and we're really looking forward to some rainy winter, like Jim Turner said.
Thank you very much. And Paul, could you maybe sum up the county efforts, and also specifically with what's going on with the Jones fire? Because after all, we not only experienced the acreage burn, but there were homes lost, and fortunately there was a federal management assessment grant came in very fast. And is there any other help that is available now, and what is happening to the homeowners as well? Can you maybe give us an update on that?
Yeah, good afternoon, Pascal. Thank you. Paul Cummings, the Nevada County Office of Emergency Services Program Manager. So I do have some good news to report. We recently found out as of Monday that Nevada County was included in the larger FEMA declaration that was part of that August lightning complex. So that's a pretty big deal for us. That is going to be focused on public assistance. So that's going to be things like supporting, the women's school that had some losses, and the Independence Trail. That's going to cover law enforcement and fire suppression. We did ask to have the private residences, the homeowners who had losses, submitted, and the state did submit those. The approval that we got back from FEMA did not include those private residences, so we're still trying to advocate. But it looks like right now the FEMA dollars and state dollars, because we were also provided with an approval under the California Disaster Assistance Act, so CDAA. That right now is all focused on the public side. So big news, and we are really trying hard to advocate. I'd say one of the biggest things that our office has been doing for the last month and a half now, if you can believe it, it's been a month and a half since the Jones fire, has been focused on recovery, advocating for Nevada County residents, advocating for our stakeholders. Been out to the Independence Trail twice. So thank you, many of you on the call who went out and helped us make that case to FEMA and to the state. So we're still trying to get as much information as we can. We're still trying to get these dollars into our county as quickly as we can. So hopefully that answers your question. And to piggyback on what Chief Matthias said, we got to remain vigilant. We have another 6 weeks at least of dangerous fire conditions. So the public needs to continue to do their part, and we're going to do our part to message and try to keep you safe.
Thank you. And Erin, Melinda, closing thoughts for you?
Yeah, I'll update quickly on our projects as well in this region. So clearly the Independence Trail is going to be a major focus throughout the winter and for years to come. We're also working on a sustainable recreation solution campaign. So part of that is this mile marker program that we're collaborating with Circle, and that's kind of come out of this cohort, is how do we provide signage down at the river to have people have a location for law enforcement to tell people where they are for public safety. So working on that throughout this winter as well. We're also partnering with the Yuba Watershed Institute. They got a grant through the Sierra Nevada Conservancy for a bunch of forest health planning on BLM land as well as BYLT land in the Round Mountain area. So that's just south of the South Yuba River. So that project is ongoing. And still working on that patchwork of public-private land. So we've got about 3 projects in this region, both north and south of the river. One is a California red-legged frog habitat that we're trying to preserve, as well as some land up on the ridgetop, and just continuing to create that comprehensive corridor of conserved lands down there.
Great, thank you. Melinda?
Just general wrap up. We've got a long road ahead of us, and Circle's really excited to be partnering with all of these folks and helping to move projects forward with watershed health at the center of how we're viewing everything that's happening. And I had a fair chance to speak today, so I don't want to take up too much time, but just appreciate being here and welcome hearing from the community and others ways that they see Circle able to step up and do more.
Great, thank you. And I would like to leave the final words to our 2 supervisors. So Sue and Heidi, where do we go from here?
So I could jump in and say that, I could say right now, we're continuing to be committed to work with this group to address a number of things that you've heard about today, both ongoing projects, but also to be looking at some of the bigger things we need to be tackling in the future. We're lucky enough to have a short-term intern right now, Sarah, who's listening in on the call, and she's going to help us pull together a report, hopefully looking a bit at what we've done so far and helping to identify sort of what are the things we need to be stepping up and doing more about. We're also going to be reviewing our fire ordinance. It has to be renewed every year, and at some point we need to decide, are we making it permanent or are we going to do more with it? So that's coming up this year as well. I just want to put a pitch out to folks in the community as well. We hear from you all the time, emails and phone calls on things you like and don't like. We'd love to hear your ideas and suggestions. You can email us, and we'd love to hear that you like that we're working on in this cohort, that you want the county and all of these agencies to continue to do this great work. It helps us to move forward. I think we're going to be wanting to look at more funding to keep this work going, to continue these collaborations. So your input, your support, and your suggestions are also very welcome. And thank you to everyone for committing the substantial time that you all do to this cohort. It's all very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to thank all of you for adding yet another 2 hours into the cohort time. And hopefully we answered some of the questions that the members of the public had. And again, if you have any questions, Jeff has offered up his email address, and if it is something that is, if you have problems with if you need resources, etc., it's always an option to call 211. They can help out. And don't forget to also support your local nonprofits, because they do a substantial amount of work both on the river and year round. And thanks to all the agency and everybody who offered up suggestions and opinions. And with that, please, everybody stay safe, don't cause any sparks, and bye-bye.